I've been made redundant 5 times in 40 years as a journalist, so yay the media. After a 40-year career, that moment when I was let go from what I considered the most important job I'd held in all of that time, I had a choice to make. Would I stay in the industry and perhaps work on stories that uh, were more general in their nature and didn't call on the expertise that I'd built, particularly in the sexual harassment reporting area in the 5 or 6 years before then? Or would I make the decision to leave the industry and build something in the NGO space that did call on that expertise and we would call it mana here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, which is kind of like a respect that I had built up in in that space. And in the end, I decided that there was important work to do in the NGO space. And the result is the Tika platform that I've built with my co-founder, who's a barrister, Zoe Lawton.
So you've spent 5 years raising awareness through the Me Too NZ. The reporting numbers did not move. What did that tell you about what awareness alone can and cannot do?
I set up the Me Too NZ reporting project at one of New Zealand's biggest publishers in 2018 in the wake of the explosion of the Me Too movement internationally. And I really did think that telling people stories, that investigating these individual cases of sexual harassment in New Zealand would be enough to really change things. What it did do, I think, and I'm quite proud of this, is shift the way issues of sexual harm and sexual harassment in the workplace, particularly, are reported by the media. But what it didn't do, despite the dozens of major investigations that we published and the hundreds and hundreds of people that we spoke to, what it didn't do is shift those reporting statistics. And what I mean by that are the number of people who report to police or other justice entities. Those remained quite stagnant, and they had been the same, 7 or 8%, for about a decade without moving. Around 90% of victim survivors never report to anyone what has happened to them. So that was the real niggle for me, if I can put it that way. That was the real the problem that remained unsolved despite all the awareness raising. And at the time, this was in 2023, I had a cup of coffee with a woman I knew because she was one of the only other people in New Zealand who had done something structured about awareness raising at the time of Me Too. Her name is Zoe Lawton, and she's a barrister. And we were both having a bit of a moan, really, about the fact that we'd done all this work and it hadn't resulted in structural change. And that's when we sat down and started developing Tika. And the first thing we did was look at why people don't report. A lot of people, 75% actually, of survivors don't really understand where what happened to them sits in the legal space, certainly. They know something bad happened, but they can't necessarily name it. That is one area, or perhaps the one area, where awareness raising really helps. One of the most powerful ones is the fear of not being believed. Because I think survivors for decades, centuries, have not been believed. There is a default and natural justice is important, and understanding that allegations need to be proven, that's important. But I think just broadly, survivors have not been believed and have been questioned. Their motivations have been questioned when it comes to women. It's what were you wearing? How much did you drink? Did you not say no forcefully enough? All of those old tropes still hold true in a lot of cases, and that's the misogyny of the patriarchy, and something that we're all working to change. But it still exists. So I think that fear of not being believed is a big one.
You have written about your own experience of sexual abuse.
Mm.
How has living inside this story and not just reporting it shaped the way you approach the problem?
I think that first and foremost, it means that I approach all of my work with a survivor's mindset, because I'm a survivor myself. So I tend to apply the kind of, it's like a do unto others like you would have done to you. I apply to every situation, how would I like to be treated as a survivor in this situation? And I think that I don't think that it means that people who have not experienced sexual harm, it doesn't mean that they can't be effective and work in this space, but I think it does give you a deeper perspective. And it means that, you're always checking yourself to make sure that the things that you say and do are trauma informed.
I want to now talk about Tika, and we'd like to learn more about what this is about. Explain to someone who's never heard of it what actually happens the moment a survivor registers.
So, Tika is an alternative reporting option. That's the category that we sit in, or I think they're known as ROs. We will be the first in New Zealand. So currently, if you want to report some kind of sexual harm, whether it's childhood sexual abuse that happened in your past, or whether it's a recent assault or online harm, you generally have to walk into a police station and report personally, physically. And we think that an alternative reporting option that is completely independent is the thing that will clear away those barriers of mistrust and fear of not being believed. And also, I think a lot of people don't necessarily know at the moment that they want to disclose what's happened to them, they don't necessarily know whether they want to make a formal police complaint. Justice and accountability looks very different to every survivor. So options and agency are really important. When you report into Tika, you register, very simple registration process, and you get immediate lawyer-client privilege. So a lawyer-client privilege relationship is formed at that moment. And that means that everything that you tell us beyond that, everything you put into our reporting platform is legally privileged, and it is therefore protected information. So that's a really important safety feature. You then tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about what happened to you, and a little bit about the person who harmed you. That information then goes into our Tika platform and the large language model, AI if you like, but it's not generative AI. The large language model starts to look for connections between your report and other people who may have reported the same person. And if a group of 3 or more is formed, the platform tells a Tika lawyer, and then you are offered free legal advice on your options. Perhaps it might even be the first time you've ever disclosed, and disclosing something that you've held to yourself for so long and told nobody about, that can lift a psychological burden, I think, in a lot of cases. but you also know that you have done something genuinely helpful to other people and genuinely designed to make our community safer. Design of the platform to be trauma informed and survivor focused, really important, because even the action of reporting can often be quite re-traumatizing when you have to tell, you know, let's say you go to police, that you might walk into a police station and you have to tell the person at the front desk
Yeah.
probably the worst thing that's ever happened to you in your life. And no matter how well trained and caring that person is, they generally have to pass you on to somebody else and you have to tell your story again. And then they
Yeah.
might connect you with a detective and you have to tell your story again. And all of these things, these conversations, these disclosures can be re-traumatizing. So it was important to us to design in the UX of our project a client journey, if I can use that kind of marketing language, a client journey that not only gives people a lot of choice, but reduces the re-traumatization that they might normally feel when they report.
It's crucial that Tika is independent, that
Mm.
many communities, including Indigenous communities, LGBTQIA plus people, and the migrant communities, do not necessarily trust the police or the government. How do you build trust with communities that have every reason not to trust a system?
The only way you can do it is by offering them an alternative that they know is completely independent and built for them. So, the attractive part, I think, of the Tika system is not only that it's online and by reporting you're helping keep other people safe. It's not just that, it's that if a group is formed, if the platform identifies that you're in a survivor group and you're given the independent legal advice that flows from that, you know that the Tika lawyer who's advising you works for you. One of the most common thing that I've personally heard from survivors when I was working as a journalist, and I've talked to probably more than 1,000 now, is if they did, if their case was taken up by police and was taken forward to trial, for example, they say things to me like, "Ali, the first day in the courtroom, I looked around and I thought that lawyer over there was my lawyer." And then they said, "No, no, that's the Crown prosecutor. They work for the Crown. You are just a witness in this case." And that is a shock. Indigenous, migrant, the disabled community, they all have much higher rates of sexual harm here in Aotearoa and also, in other places around the world. Those are the communities that suffer the most, and it's really crucial that we're able to reach them and gain their trust.
1 in 3 women experience sexual harm in their lifetime. You have called this as the last taboo, big taboo in our society. What is going to take to finally change that?
In this country, in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we have made significant strides, I think, with domestic or family violence as a national conversation. I don't think we've got to the same spot with sexual violence or sexual harm yet. I think it is a conversation that much of society finds really difficult to have.
You have changed journalism and now you're trying to change the justice system itself. Where is the courage to
Yeah, no
keep,
pressure.
no pressure, but where does the courage to keep going come from when the system is so resistant?
I, I'm not silly enough to imagine that I'm doing this for completely selfless reasons. I think most people who are driven to make change in society A tiny bit of them does it because it makes them feel good about themselves. So I guess I want to get to the end of my life and know that I've made a difference in this space for other people, because this is the bit of community work that I'm best equipped to make a difference in. So I guess there's a bit of that. Uh, I have a platform, and I think there's a responsibility when you have a platform to use it. When you talk about courage, I think it's more um, I think it's more determination than courage, really. Determination to make a difference, and perhaps the courage part flows from there.
What do you want a survivor listening to this conversation feel?
I want you to feel hope. I think that every time we wake up and open our phone these days, and we scroll through social media, or we read any news website, or we watch the news on television, if you're a person who still does that, or read the newspaper, you are inundated with kind of hopelessness, I guess, and horrific stuff that's going on all around you. And I think a lot of people have come to the place where they're feeling what I would call cause fatigue. So you see all this terrible, harm, and you can't see any way to respond to it. You don't know how to respond to it because there's just so much of it. I think the great thing about Tika is that it gives you something to do, something meaningful to do, whether you donate to us through our charitable arm, or whether you report as a survivor, or whether you just spread the news that there's a new reporting platform available that's potentially going to give you free legal representation. Even if that's all you do, you've done something meaningful to help alleviate this situation. And here in New Zealand, this is a crisis level issue. We have, despite the fact that we have a really good reputation here for gender equality, actually we have some of the worst domestic and sexual violence rates in the OECD. So it is an issue that is, I would say, at crisis point. And I hope we've built something that gives you something positive to do. So if you are a survivor out there, certainly in New Zealand, but also in the wider world, because we're a technology project and we're hoping to be able to scale this project globally, I hope that you have hope.